Hey guys, Typo Comics here. I'm Zach.
I'm Matt.
I'm Simon.
And just wanted to we're doing a little introduction actually to a video we've been thinking about making for a while now. On the subject of Comicsgate and our views on it and of what's been going on, and basically, do we consider ourselves Comicsgate? Mm-hmm. So we actually shot some footage before of us discussing what we're going to say about it on the video, and we just kind of decided to just record that and just kind of let it be more free form. So I started recording in the middle of that conversation. So we thought maybe we should do a little intro, just to make things a little bit clearer about our thoughts on Comicsgate. Simon, what say you?
Well, I got kind of introduced to it by you, though I kind of feel that it was a thing that was always in the background, no matter what. It's been a pervasive thing in a lot of not just pop culture, but a lot of entertainment, a lot of media, but in particular with the comic book thing. It's this kind of, I'd say, a very polarizing force going around that is dividing a lot of people, and it's a very, very pervasive. I don't know if we want to call it an agenda, but you can't deny that there is a overwhelming want to push narrative or a kind of forced ideal on people in something as benign as a comic book. To me, comic book, well, it really is. It's the bastard child of the comic strip, the Sunday funnies, and they kind of evolved into a comic book. Bill Watterson, I think, was quoted as saying that the comic book is stupid. He doesn't like the comic books. He likes the comic strips.
Right.
But it's all from the same wellspring, man. It's artists and creators getting together, trying to share their work. This is a labor of love. There's no way like you ever see a comic and someone didn't care about what they were doing. That's nonsense. Like, there's a lot of care. There's a lot of oneself that goes into it. It's like a vulnerable thing. So when people start to push that out of the way, like the actual creative process, and replace it with something that they've got to sell or something that they feel isn't quite represented enough for themselves, for the audience that they want to see, as opposed to what it's been. Comic book fans, there are fandoms for every different series, different titles, and those are very particular about what's the content of those comics or cartoons or books, whatever have you. And that's kind of been shoved away. There's a lot of stuff that is just put in for the value of having it there because it looks more politically correct, or it's just topical and people want to see that right now and everything so that everyone's represented. And that's fine if you want to represent, whatever, but it's also good to do your own thing. The problem with the Comicsgate, what it springs from, is that it's the beloved characters of old, like Superman, the Flash, Batman, any of the big two companies. There's the DC and the Marvel. A lot of the characters that people have fallen in love with over time, they've been radically changed, or the writing has been such that it's unrecognizable as those characters that they fell in love with. These people, comic fans, man, they have a bond with your work. It's not just like, oh, they like the funny drawings or the stories. Like, these characters mean something to them. These are their heroes. These are like the myths of today, the mythology, the mythos. We don't have Hercules, but we have Superman. We have the Hulk. So when you see that taken away from them, and it caused a divide. It really did. And it's Some people think, well, you just deal with it. You know, it's changing times. You know, everything shifts eventually. And you shouldn't be so whiny that these characters are being stripped down and made into something else. You know, if you don't like it, don't read it. But that's a problem because people like what they like. They want to read it. The other problem is now that there's this Comicsgate thing that's happening, it's become an outlet for independent creators. And people are finding that, hey, you know, there's other stuff to read, and that's really hurt I think the mainstream comics are a little bit shaken now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess what really gets the old wind out of the sails for me is that there was a case of one guy who was told, well, do it better, do your own comic, and he did. A Comicsgate guy. And then a mainstream creator, or whatever you want to call him, went ahead and made sure that man's work could not be put in a comic shop for fear of reprisals against him. And that is an unacceptable action by anybody. It's more than bullying, man. It's a complete lack of respect and a complete lack of anything creative. You know, that shouldn't be the act of anyone who says they're an artist or a writer or anything like that. But that's what happened. So his book was kept out of main comic book stores. The comic book owner was irreversibly damaged. And that's where it's sitting now. There's a lot of hate back and forth between everybody. I think you should just draw your own damn comic. Speaking of which, Matt, what are you doing there?
I am inking the latest page of the latest issue of Bad Sushi Cannon, where they actually land on Earth and will, or are, meeting up with Loogie, the character Loogie that we've all dreaded drawing and inking all this time because he is such a complicated character to render. We've kind of simplified him, but there's no way to really say you've simplified something like that.
No.
You can't quite bare bones it. A lot of scales, a lot of dreadlocks, a lot of teeth, a lot of claws.
What do you think about the Comicsgate thing? We were asked recently, you know, if we're friendly towards it, if we're part of it, and it's hard not to be one way or the other if you're doing comics right now.
You know, everything is so polarized now in this country, politically and socially, that you can't just not take a side. Now, I have always counted myself since I was in high school as a crazy screaming liberal. The problem is, and I haven't changed, the problem is I got left behind. And where I was a crazy screaming ranting liberal, things have gotten a lot worse. As far as people's behavior, people's, I guess, insistence on normalizing what I used to celebrate as you know, difference. You know, now it's insisted upon, you know. It's got to be normal, and you have to see it as normal. We don't all get to be normal. I was never normal. And I thought that that kind of was a badge you could wear once you got past, you know, the idea of never really quite fitting in. But that's changed now, of course. People are different. The times are different. And I think people have gotten a lot lazier. You know, it used to be something where you had to work at making your way in life if you were different, different in a way that maybe made you less palatable or, certainly less mainstream. Now we've gotten lazy and want to just be accepted or else.
Mm.
And I don't agree with that. I think that's dangerous. It's a dangerous mode of thought. I think that down that road is where true censorship comes in. Where, we had, I'm old. I'm the old man at the table. I'm, in my 40s. So those of us in our 40s, we had the rock and roll trials, and we had, the PMRC to rail against, Tipper Gore, and I think that things have gotten to the point where there's a laziness, an unwillingness to do the work, to put the boots to the pavement where it comes to acceptance, and so we're going down this road where this dangerous thought is that everybody has to be normal and accepted or else. In that, then we'll all become the same, and people are mistaking the word "same" for equal. And like I said, that there's dangerous things down that road. When when it's insisted that everybody's normal, everything is normal, and nothing is out of the norm. The thing you have to wonder is who's making these determinations. Because right now, you might like that. You might enjoy who's making these determinations and in whose favor, but there's nothing saying that you will later on. And down the road, where and when it's too late, that could change, and it usually does. Historically, it always has. We're at odds and extremes right now, and it's a strange world to live in. I don't think that anybody should be forced to be straight or gay. I don't think they should be forced in any kind of thought. So if that means that somebody is gay or gender fluid or, I guess we used to say bisexual. I don't know. I'm old. I don't get all of the terminology now. And it doesn't really apply to me, so, it doesn't, seem that important to me. I know that sounds cruel and weird, but it's nothing I keep up with. What I will say is nobody should be forced to be one way or the other. Nobody should be forced to be straight or gay or whatever. And you can't be forced then to think a certain way about those groups, about those people, about any individual. You can't be told what to think. I think we had talked before, Zach, about the difference between social commentary and political commentary, which in my thinking is completely acceptable and only natural to have in comic books, any kind of entertainment media. The creator's going to have some voice in it. Stan Lee certainly did that. But so there's such a thing as provoking thought, and then starting conversation and engaging in the exchange of ideas. But what happens these days is instead of provoking thought, people seem to want to tell people what to think, how to think and when to think it, how severely to think it. And then, of course, that doesn't get conversation going. It usually shuts conversations down, and you see people, shutting people out, shutting each other out. If you don't agree with me on these terms, then we can't even talk. And now with social media, of course, that's just as easy as hitting an unfollow button or an unfriend button. You don't have to do that to their face, which I'm an old guy. I just kind of believe in doing things differently. But I agree that I disagree with the way things are going. I have no problem with any group of people per se on the terms of who they are. I have a grievance with being told how I should or shouldn't think about any group of people. So I guess that's where I stand. That's where I've always stood. I'll die on that hill. I don't want to be told what I should think or feel. I don't think anybody else should. I think it shouldn't be that lazy. You shouldn't be able to just insert your ideas, your propaganda into, something like comic books, which has been a long-running, escape for for the freaks, like me, who just wanted to get away for a little while. And now it's filled with agenda. It's filled with forced thought, forced opinion, and I don't agree with it.
Yeah, I personally think at the heart of the whole thing with Comicsgate is more and more people are they're tying their identity with what they consume.
Mm-hmm.
And a certain group in the population tends to look at outside structures for what to think and how to feel. So constantly we hear about the way artists portray their points of view. In fact, I was just watching a video today on Wes Anderson and how his work is problematic because all of his movies are from the point of view of upper class white men, and also like the Darjeeling Limited is set in India, I believe,
Mm-hmm.
and all the people of India are in the background, so my problem with that, so he was basically saying, Wes Anderson, his movies often involve casual racism and ignorance and whatnot.
What is casual racism? We'll have to talk about that another time.
It sounds to me like pretty much, it's racist, but it doesn't really hurt anybody.
I see.
But it's so I always hear that. So the argument is he's not addressing people of color or people outside of entitled rich white men. Now, I think we can all safely assume Wes Anderson is probably a rich entitled white man.
Sure.
I don't think anybody's going to argue against that. But I've heard so many arguments from that's the SJW NPC side that would argue if he were to attempt to make a movie about another person from a person of color or whatever, and this is separating the idea that the Grand Budapest Hotel is not about the main character is not that's a whole thing that the video tend to ignore. But Wes Anderson, if he made it about somebody else, they would, well, why are you making that movie? Shouldn't a person of color be making that movie?
Right.
And it's like, no, you can't dictate what an artist, creates. You can't, bully them into having a worldview that they don't have.
Yeah.
And you certainly can't censor a piece of artwork, which is what I see going on a lot, especially in the comics community right now, is if you don't have the right opinions, if 51% of the population doesn't like what you have to say, then you're on the wrong side of history or whatever. And, you know, I've been following the Comicsgate scene for a while now, you know, going back to, you know, when I first started watching diversity in comics, and I remember I was thrilled to see somebody with such enthusiasm for the medium, somebody who had a lot of knowledge and cared a lot about comics, because you know, comics has always been a neglected medium in my estimation. Like, you know, when's the last time you saw an ad for it on TV?
Right.
You know, you don't see comic book writers and artists on talk shows, except with the exception of Seth Meyer. I will give him credit. He's been bringing people like Grant Morrison and Alex Ross on, and it's always thrilling to see that, but that's the exception to the rule.
Mm-hmm.
So, comics it's always been neglected, and to see, you know, diversity in comics, you know, come on the scene and gain such popularity was thrilling to me, because, you know, it kind of opened things up in terms of like YouTube, you know, kind of creating a renaissance for comics.
Mm-hmm.
You know, comics is finally gotten its own, you know, Roger Ebert or whatever, and there's been, you know, magazines and whatnot, but, you know, it's a little bit different. So, you know, I followed that, and you know, he was getting a lot of flack. A lot of people can't seem to discern between they can't discern between criticism and harassment, and that's where your boy Zach seems to be getting in a lot of trouble with people. Now, I've watched a ton of his videos. I've been following him for a while now, and he seems extremely fair. It doesn't matter if he has issues with a writer. Like, as soon as they make a comic that, you know, he likes, you know, he will give credit where credit is due.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see that on the other side.
Nope.
On Comicsgate, I see credit being given where it's due. I see an enthusiasm that I haven't seen in comics for a while. You know, this, you know, for the first time, it's really exciting to be in indie comics now. You know, and despite what anti-Comicsgaters see, I see a lot of diversity, not only of thought, but of, you know, gender, creed, nationality, you know, all the things that SJWs claim they champion, but I'm not seeing it. It just rings hollow to me. So, yeah, it's just, I think we all agree that we align ourselves with Comicsgate, and you know, it's the first time, you know, we've really been, you know, inspired. Like, we've been making comics for a while now, but
Really, just in spite of ourselves, you know.
yeah,
Until now.
Because, you know, we you know, we're artists. We like the medium, but this is, you know, there's a lot of momentum for the indie artists that we haven't seen for a while. So I think it's a combination of just neglect as a whole. You know, the industry has been going down a bad road for a while now. It hasn't been creating a wider audience.
No.
It's been failing, and the best that most people can hope for is to, you know, sell the rights of their comic to some movie studio.
Which is sad.
Yeah, it is. So I think we need to, you know, as far as the industry goes, as far as the big two goes, yes, they need to stop, you know, jamming their weird propaganda down our throats, and the creators, the people in that industry, need to stop bullying people who vote and think differently than them. Like, among the three of us, we don't hold the same political views. There's a lot of overlap, but we disagree on a lot, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And we argue and we debate, but after that, you know, we realize what we have in common, and we move past that because we're artists. We're not politicians. We're here to express ourselves. We're not here to, argue, whether or not you should be a Democrat or Republican. My favorite quote of all time has to be, politicians are intellectual rapists and artists are intellectual seducers. I think that's probably the most apt quote, that I can associate with Comicsgate, is I see far too many quote artists and creators in the industry becoming politicians, and they've forgotten that yes, you can insert ideas, you can insert politics, even, but you have to be entertaining first.
Mm-hmm.
You have to seduce people into seeing your point of view, because comic books, it's a very unique medium. It's a visual medium that's the most pure to me, because you can show exactly what's in your own mind.
Right.
Whereas movies, it's collaboration. There's always compromise. But with comics, it's almost can be a singular worldview, that you show people. And there's so much to worldview beyond politics. I mean, making everything about politics just makes the world boring,
dumb,
terrible,
just
place.
dumb.
And forcing artists and people who make comics to pick a side,
Yeah.
we would be more than happy not to make this video and just make comics, but we feel we're at the point now where we have to voice out to the world what we believe, because it seems to be, that old Bush saying, like, if you're not with us, you're against us.
Right.
And I feel that's what the people in the mainstream have turned this into. You're either with us or against us, and there are those who keep quiet. There are those who, have opinions that don't follow the mainstream, and they just feel that they just need to shut up. But we're not like that. We're not gonna, just kowtow to a bunch of strangers, essentially. For what? What do we get out of that?
Right.
Bullying
strangers, no less.
Right. We just want to put our books out there, and I would say Bad Sushi Cannon is pretty apolitical.
Yeah.
As a comic about anthropomorphic repo men in space would be. It doesn't have a lot to say about Antifa or Trump or Me Too or
it's not
immigration.
very topical. No, it's just not.
It's an escape from all that.
Right.
It's
a comic book.
It's a bastion of away from that, where you can pick up a book and have a good time and see some, crazy stuff that you wouldn't see in a boring, mundane political world.
How dare you, sir?
I know.
Suggest such things. Yeah.
And I think something that Matt beautifully illustrates in our hour-long, ramblings is the difference between social ideas and political ideas. Despite what most people say, you don't have to turn everything into a political statement. Not everything has to be turned into politics. And, I think if people disagree with that, I don't know, I find that to be a little unreasonable. Just a little bit.
Just a tad.
Because who wants to live in that world?
I couldn't possibly live in a world where everything was constantly about, governing policy, and I couldn't see myself thriving in that, and I couldn't see any artistic, creative mind thriving in that, because it would just all be about, eventually, what the machine or what the herd mentality demands of you.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to get by within its cogs?
Now, what I will say, I will make a political a statement, an opinion here, is something I can't stand, is when something happens. It usually happens after a tragedy, and a politician will come in, and they will push their own political agenda, and people will cry, "How can you make this about politics?" Well, they're a politician. That's their job.
Right.
If you're a politician, make everything political by all means. That's your job. That's how you're supposed to see the world. But everybody else, we have the option not to do that because
we're not politicians.
Yeah. And artists, again, we're way outside that. Now, you can comment on things, you can play with ideas, but you don't need to turn art into propaganda.
No.
Let politicians do that. Let you know.
How long did people fight to protect art and its expressions from politics? It was politicians that have always sought to hinder it, to censor it, to, you get the Tipper Gores of the world. But Tipper Gore wasn't the first one. And
Frederick Wortham was it?
Yeah.
He was a contender for killing off.
She won't be the last.
And for every Tipper Gore, you had a Frank Zappa.
Right.
Or
a D. Snyder.
You had Guar.
Guar.
And Guar, they responded with art.
Yeah.
They pushed to an extreme what Tipper Gore was fighting against.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the irony. Like, I just... It makes you wonder about these people who try to censor diversity in comics. It only makes him more powerful. It only makes you look worse,
Yeah.
Right. He gains every day more and more credibility when you see how people act towards him. Everybody wants to be some big hero. We all want to punch a Nazi and go home and we were the good guy in this, the end. And then now we get to watch TV. Well, that's fun. That's easy. But the reality is, of course, you have to, if you want to change the world, and I think that people should always continually change the world, you have to actually do that. That's the thing you have to do. You don't get to sit on the couch. You don't get to be typing at a keyboard. That won't change the world. What it will do is allow people who maybe not have the best interest of a people in mind to step in and say, go ahead and censor each other. I don't think you should let this guy talk because he's saying some things that you're not going to like. So don't let him talk. And as soon as you're okay with that, man, I guess you're just okay with that. It's dangerous. Yeah. It's really dangerous. And it's amazing to me. I've said before, and I say it in astonishment. God, I am, crazy-eyed, screaming liberal. I am. I'm not. I'm no different in my views than I was back then. But the world moved way past me to a spot that I'll go along, on any idea train that makes sense, but the wagon has to have round wheels, and the road has to go somewhere. That's what I always say. The road has to go somewhere. Otherwise, why would I ride on that wagon? Where is it going to go? And that ride is just going to be unnecessarily bumpy.
Yeah, I mean, censorship never works. It's, if you have somebody out there who, here's my philosophy in general in life. You talk to somebody, it could be your best friend that you've known for 20 years. It could be a complete stranger. If you talk with them long enough, they're going to say something that not only you completely disagree with, but you find absolutely abhorrent.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't matter who you're talking to.
Especially if you know me.
Right. You said plenty of things that have made my
Good
skin
God.
crawl.
Good God.
Good. Great Googling movie. So, chill the hell out. That's basically what I'm saying, because you don't have all the answers. You don't have the right answers. And when you communicate with people throughout your life, you're going to say the wrong things a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So now think if you're an artist and you're expressing, sometimes your innermost thoughts. How many innermost thoughts do you have that are a little bit tasteless or a little bit beyond the norm?
Yeah.
That's what art's for. It's to explore that area. Much of that area is not permissible in everyday life, And once again, Bad Sushi is not some sort of avant-garde, outsider art.
Right.
But again, where we have to sit here and we have to argue this and articulate these points, because somewhere along the line we
you're constantly in danger of being misunderstood.
Yeah.
Or words and thoughts being, meaning being put to words that were put into your mouth. They put words into your mouth, and then they assign meaning to them that I never even said that.
And that's where that whole idea of your identity being tied into what you consume. You read a comic that's supposed to, it's not your Bible. It's not, you don't have to wrap yourselves around it like a fucking serpent,
Mm-hmm.
It's just a thing, it's just it's some disposable entertainment. We have the luxury to, sit around in our free time and just make a goofy comic,
Right.
And we enjoy that, and we're grateful for that, and we're grateful that, we can convince some people to not only, look at it, but to, maybe purchase it and, have a laugh or, whatever.
One of the most wonderful feelings I can think of is not just someone buying the book, although that's a pretty good feeling, but someone who genuinely is entertained. I can't think of anything better than somebody reading something you made, and whatever the intent was, laughing or crying or whatever, but becoming emotionally engaged with that work and understanding it on a level that maybe even the artist didn't understand. Maybe sometimes they appreciate things on a different level than you even intended. You put in there, people understand things on their own when they're allowed to think and enjoy art on their own terms. They find things that sometimes even the artist didn't know, and that's kind of a fun thing. And that's probably one of the most wonderful feelings I could think of experiencing, is seeing somebody engage with your work like that. And I just don't see a lot of that happening in works that are prescribed. They're prescribed. There's no danger in the propagandized comic. There's no challenge. There's no shock. It's all very much the same. Now is when we add this message, and now is when this message is received, and I don't know.
Spoon feed us everything. Give us all the answers.
Right.
If you don't address something, an issue, that means you're neglecting it.
Well, good God, what does Oprah think about all this?
Let me ask her.
I don't
Oprah.
I don't think we're going to be in her book club anytime soon.
I don't know.
I did fancy myself.
Don't.
I thought I'd be the Banksy of the comic world, but I guess, who knows?
Banksy?
The Banksy of the
comic world.
My comic's going to self-destruct upon us as soon as someone buys it. Just like that painting I did. Boom! Surprise!
It could be like, you know, those paint bombs they put in, you know, people who rob banks, they put in the suitcase.
It's like a big purple blot. Poof.
So we'll have, like, you know, paint bombs in there that self-destruct, and they burst, and it says Comicsgate somehow.
Yeah,
on your
yeah.
Shirt, so you can be shamed out in public like you should be for reading a fucking filthy book
A
from
rag.
bad comic skaters.
Dun, dun, dun.
Naughty, naughty boys over there at Comicsgate.
Well, I believe, and I'll say it, like, my motto is, you know, read a comic and smile. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Read one, and if it's good, man, then you'll know it.
I agree.
There you go.
So, I think we'll go ahead and make this part 1. This was a little bit more thought out. So, part 2 will be some more rambling about our thoughts about Comicsgate. And thanks for watching.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.